Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here to give the opening remarks for this session called Unleashing Women Leadership in Indonesia. We started talking about this with our friends from McKinsey, I think slightly less than a year ago, and I also participated in a number of fora such as the APEC Women and the Economy Forum, as well as in the World Economic Forum, where the famous McKinsey study on the survey of women was widely used to prove many points. And of course Joanna's book, which will be discussed later, and some of us have read it, some of you who have not read it, of course we highly recommend that you read it, I think has encouraged me to think again how we really need to answer this question about unleashing women leadership in Indonesia. I'd like to just maybe say, have three themes in this opening remark. One is, what is the reality that we are facing now? Are women undervalued and underestimated? Question. Second, why do we need to unleash women leadership anywhere in the world, but especially in Indonesia? I think Raul already hinted at some of the why. And then of course, what do we need to do to realize this potential? And your sessions today, as well as the discussions that you will have today, hopefully will get to that last answer. And what would be important is we as a group of Indonesian women in this room, we should be asking the question, what do we all need to do collectively next to ensure that the potential is realized? First, are women undervalued and underestimated? I think probably if I ask that question, I will hear a resounding yes from this room. But some of the numbers will tell you that, okay, for Indonesia, we had 5 cabinet ministers in the last cabinet in 2009 who are women. Unfortunately, we now have 3 left, but 2 are vice ministers, so we still have 5. But it was really based on affirmative action, or if you like, quota, that the president actually self-announced. But we like to think that it was merit-based and based on professionalism. Slightly less than 10% in first-tier and second-tier management in the bureaucracy are women, despite the target set by the Women Affairs Minister of 30%. But I'm proud to say that when I was in the Ministry of Trade, I doubled that to 26%. That was the 22% in the first tier and 26% in the second tier. And now in the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy, I just put the new team together, and in the new team we are about 30% in the second tier. Not yet first tier women. And it is merit-based. It's not what we call token quota. For state-owned enterprises, only 5 out of 147 state-owned corporations are headed by women, so only 3.4%. For political leadership, we do have a target of 30%, but it's at the nomination level, not at the final elected level. But it has worked. It has pushed the number of women parliamentary members from 11.8 to 18% between 2004 and 2009. I think what the McKinsey study shows is that women at the entry level, or even at the education level, and this is kind of similar to Indonesian numbers, that at the education level we get equal access. At the entry level it's about 50%, I think 53% in the McKinsey global study, and for Indonesia I think it's 49%. But then there's this funnel, you know, at the entry level it's around that number, and then it narrows down as you reach senior management and executive committee level. And in the McKinsey study, by the time you get to the CEO, it's only 3% who are women. Indonesia is doing slightly better, according to the study. We have 5% at the CEO level. So I think it's clear that we are undervalued and underestimated. Despite the equal access at the beginning, when you come to the top, there's this funnel effect. And of course the big question out there is, how do we work on that issue, and how do we prevent this funneling effect? and more importantly, why should we be doing that? And I think, Indonesia has had a few firsts. We have had a woman president. We've had a woman as a president, and for a country with the largest Muslim population in the world, I think that's kind of a good first. But I think we still have some way to go. And having, I'm somewhat proud of our president. In 2004, he also doubled the number of women in the cabinet, and he put women in important positions, not just what they call token positions, but also important portfolio. But we have some way to go. And why is it that we should be unleashing the women leadership potential and remove this reality of being undervalued and underestimated? Well, I should say that another number that's always used is that women earn less than men. For the same job, women tend to earn less than men and get less benefits. We were talking about this the other day about insurance. That if you're married, the company in the government, it's assumed that you don't need insurance because your husband will cover the insurance. So you don't get the insurance, or you only get insurance for yourself. So this again is part of the being undervalued and underestimated. Okay, why should we be unleashing women leadership? Because we want to have equal access, we want to have gender equality. Yes, by law, Indonesia is very advanced. If Melly can correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm not mistaken, we have been recognized equally from the beginning. Yeah, but of course, implementation-wise is another question. But at least legally speaking, we do not have to fight for equal rights. But I think what I found in the last year is that it's more important to make the argument that it makes economic and business sense to unleash the women leadership. Because after all, we can count, right? Everybody can count. Women are half of the population. Why should you be not utilizing the half of the human resources that you have in your economy? It's not very smart. So if you do utilize fully half of your population or human capital, you will increase growth, equity, and reduce poverty. I mean, that's I think, goes without saying. The second reason is what Raul already mentioned. Boards with women or with gender diversity do better, profit-wise, rate of return, turnover of management, and so on. Make better decisions, they say, and are better companies as a result, just from the testimony by Raul. And it is supported by the global study done by McKinsey. And I think another reason is, do you ladies know what is the largest economy in the world? And it is larger than the emerging economy of China or India. I should say the largest economy in the world, but the fastest growing economy in the world. And it's not an emerging economy. It's larger than China, it's larger than India. China's economy is about 10 trillion, and India is about 7 or 8 trillion. This is a size of 13 trillion. It's twice that of India and China. It is the size of women consumption. Okay, so I've looked at a number of these studies. It's very interesting. On average, 60 to 70% of buying decision is being decided by women. For some purchases like holiday or health or education, 90% of the decision is made by women. Even buying cars, I found this one rather surprising. Buying cars, 60 to 70% of the decision is being made by the woman. Of course, you're the one who's going to have to make sure there's a child seat in the car. You're going to make sure that it's a van, not a Ferrari. So women are very powerful in the buying and the decision making. So it makes sense for women to be involved in the companies, because you are the one who understands the market, right? You will have the sensitivity to understand the market. So that's another reason why it's important to have women leadership. And as Raul said, I think the talent pool. Why should you be, not utilizing the talent pool that's available in a country. You need to open up equally for men and women based on merit, based on the competitive advantage, and so on and so forth. And that's really the reality. And for us to be competitive, to be able to adjust to globalization, that is the way forward. It's the only way forward. And I think with families having less children, I think it's automatically that the kind of discrimination has declined. You can see it in the second generation of family businesses in Indonesia. You will find equally the daughters or the sons being asked to take care of the business. It's no longer just the sons or the son-in-laws, but it is also equally the sons and the daughters. So I think this is, we see it in the way forward, but I think what is really of importance and what we hope the discussion will be later today will be, what do we need to do to unleash women leadership? Is it quotas? This is the most, you will find later on, I hope, you will have a very lively discussion on this. I think there's no real answer about this. Should you have quotas, mandatory quotas, so that you have more women in leadership? This is, I think, still an inconclusive debate. There are some governments, especially in Europe, who already have mandatory quotas. The French law requires listed firms to reserve 40% of its board seats for women by 2017. Norway and Spain have similar regulations. But of course the question is out there is, what happens if they don't actually meet that? Do they get delisted? Is it that severe of a punishment? We don't quite know. Germany is considering a similar regulation. And in Europe, Vivian, I forgot her last name, but she's the European Commissioner for Women Affairs. She's been fighting for European boards to have 30% female by 2015 and 40% by 2020. Norway has always been used as an example of a country which has tried to do it with, I guess, mixed results. I don't know the answer, but I think most of us would like to be there not as part of a quota or as a token woman to be put there. We want to be there based on merit. I have mixed feelings about quotas, but I think if you have targets or aspirational quotas, but still have some way that it's merit-based, then that's the way to go. And you can't just have quotas in isolation of all the policies that are needed to support the target being met. So more importantly is the kind of policies and mindset change that you have to ensure that the targets are met. So based on, I think I've tried to summarize just all the things that I've been hearing for the last 12 months on this subject. And I think what needs to be done comes to a few ideas or maybe issues. Yeah? Quota okay. Quota or opportunity is an empty promise unless you combine it with a consistent program to help women reach that position. I think some of you have been using the word ecosystem. So what's the ecosystem that it makes sure opportunity or the quote or whatever can be okay. What are the obstacles? I think you will hear later on. I thought I would just mention in very general terms what the obstacles are and perhaps share my own experiences with dealing with these obstacles. Getting to the middle management, this funnel effect, at the entry level, women seem to have equal access, but they face structural obstacles, realities that make it difficult for women to advance because of lifestyle, because of having to balance family and work, because we don't travel as much, we don't have the flexible conditions, because when you've just started, you're still single or newly married, But as soon as you have to get to middle management, you may be already with a family or with kids, and then you have to do this balance. And that's where you can't travel, or you can't take a heavier responsibility, and that's why you have this funnel effect, basically. And then by the time you're ready to go to work again, when you're an empty nester, then you're too old to be considered. So this is really some of the challenges we have. And actually, women in developing countries or emerging economies are in a better position than our sisters in developed countries. I found this number interesting. One study shows that 2/3 of American women switch from full to part-time work or flexible work to balance work and family at some point in their career. They have to make this choice because they are often the ones that have to take care of their parents or the family. So we are luckier, I think, because we have extended family, we have help, and so on. But nevertheless, we do still face those challenges. And even more difficult is once, say you take time off, you leave to take time for your family. It's not easy to come back again to work, you know. So that's one of the major obstacles. So therefore, you need to structure the workplace. You know, what the challenge out there is for companies and the workplace. Can they be more flexible in terms of the way women work? Can they make sure that they, otherwise they will lose the talent. They will lose the women talent. Can you have more flexible time, work from home, childcare facilities, flexibilities without sacrificing quality or performance? Yeah, that's a big question out there. We do not know the answers. We have ideas about how it's been done elsewhere. What will work in Indonesia, I think, is a big question out there. You know, you always, in Indonesia, we always say peran ganda, right? Aren't you sick of being asked about peran ganda? I have my standard answer. I'm sure all of you have the same standard. I said, why are you asking me about peran ganda? My role as a mother, as a wife, and then as you know, a career woman. Why don't you ask the men the same question? You know, peran ganda works both ways, yeah. And men equally need to spend time with family as women do. But again, it's never balanced in that way. Then you have to fight institutional mindsets. You know, widely held, often unconscious beliefs that limit women's advancement, espoused by most managers. You know, so, oh, we should put a woman there, she's going to get pregnant or she's going to get married, you know, then all our investment in her would be gone, you know, would be wasted. You know, women are promoted on performance, whereas men are promoted on potential. You know, I find that really quite annoying. Here are some of the institutional mindsets that, you know, you pick up from all the different conversations we've been having for the last 12 months or so. Men give direct and personal feedback to men, but not to women. They're afraid, oh, if we criticize the woman, she's going to cry. You know, come on, you know. Women are too emotional and don't make good bosses. Women must watch what they say. So if we are, you know, seen as to be tegas or really firm, or in English, aggressive, women are seen to be seen as aggressive, whereas for the same behavior, men are seen to be assertive. Big difference, huh? And it gets played over and over again. So, and women should not be too ambitious. You should never show your ambition too much, because otherwise you'll be a threat, you know. That's, I think, the institutional mindsets that are there. And I think what needs to be done is to, later on in the panel, as well as in what I think Joanna will share with you, how do we change this? How do we get more Raoul's out there? I think Raoul made a good testimony just then. His mindset's already changed. McKinsey's mindset has been changed. How can you spread this virus elsewhere? What else can be done? Role modeling. I think all of you here are role models for others who will follow you. You know, seeing somebody who's actually achieved it and you know, achieved it and broken whatever barriers and obstacles gives inspiration and encouragement for others to follow. You know, I don't think I'm particularly a role model. I think it was not designed, it was sort of by accident. When I first came back from Indonesia after being abroad for almost 20 years, I did not know that I was going to be the first woman economist with a PhD degree from overseas. It was totally unintended, but I found myself usually in the same room, the only woman in the room of male economists. And therefore my mentors were mainly male, not female, but that's okay, you know. And then of course, fortunately Miranda came along, I think 2 or 3 years later, and then there were more and more women economists. But being the first was not easy, actually. But you know, you do in the end try to deal with it. Skills and capacity building, leadership skills, self-confidence, assurance training, and not to be swayed by double standards. Personal beliefs that limit one's professional growth and advancement. Some people would say this is more like the traditional values that tend to prevent us from, wanting to succeed or wanting to be seen to be successful. I mean, I had to go through this as a young girl. My dad was my mentor was more my dad than my mom. My mom used to always tell me, because of traditional way of thinking, I think, don't be so smart, you know, nobody's gonna want to be your boyfriend, you know. And then as I finished my schooling and I wanted to do the PhD, he said, no, don't do your PhD, get married first. Because if you get your PhD first, nobody's gonna marry you, you know. And I faced this all throughout growing up. But fortunately, my dad had a very different view. Maybe it wasn't more a gender-sensitive view, but it was more a practical view, I think. He basically told me that you should get the best education you can and become financially independent, because you never know. Even if you get married, you never know, right? So be financially independent, and then you'll be right. And that's the only thing that I can give to you is, you know, good education and the ability for you to then become financially independent. So in the end, I think my mother came around, and I did get married and have 2 kids. And in the end, she was a great help in being part of the extended family that you need to be able to be successful in balancing family and so on. So I think the tradition is in a culture like ours, in the Eastern way of life and style that we live in, that is going to be a tough one. All of you can share your views on that. I think technology will be a very great tool for women to be in leadership position. It should be allowing you to work from home or to work remote from anywhere. Yeah, I use the email, the BB, the whatever technology tools, not only to manage my staff. You can ask my staff, some of them are here. I get quite upset when they don't respond within 1 hour. And email, you know, you can always send instruction by email and get the answer back by email. You don't have to be physically there. And it's also the way you manage your family and career, right? How many of you have a special ring for the phone when your son or daughter calls? Or your husband, you know? So you put it on silent, but you can always put it there, and then you can see who is calling, right? If it's your son or your daughter or your husband, you can always leave the room to take the phone call. Women are very good at multitasking, right? Because we are so used to, when you have a baby, you know, the baby can be like 3 rooms away, and you can almost sense it when the baby's going to cry, yeah? And at the same time you're working or you're doing something else at the same time. So you're keeping your ear out to hear whether the child is crying, but you're working at the same time. And women everywhere in the world, at least in Indonesia, they're doing the farming. At the same time when they come home, they do the cooking as well as earning extra income by making batik and so on. So we are very good at multitasking, and that makes us good at being in leadership positions. Finally, I think what can we be doing in Indonesia? I think to unleash women leadership, they've got to get there in the first place. how are they going to get there? I think fighting for equal access from birth to all the way to the leadership position is still important. So when you talk about from birth to leadership position, it starts with health care, equal access and priority health care for pregnant women for the first 1 to 5 years child, and for education. You know, if I'm fortunate that my father gave me equal access for education, that I could go to the highest level. But as we know, this is not the case as it is today. And that's still important, I think, to fight for. A difficult one is attitude and perceptions. You know, how do we deal with attitude and perceptions? I think we need to be encouraged to do the best we can. You know, girls should be encouraged to do the best they can, to be as smart as they can, to be as successful as they can. It should be really, really merit-based. Achieve the best and know that the opportunities and infrastructure are there. If a girl is branded ambitious, it's considered bad. You know, how many times have at least I have experienced this, not just with my mother, but with many of my relatives. Don't be so ambitious. You know, it's somehow negative. But if you say that to a boy, oh, you're good. You know, this is ambitious is good for a boy. This is so traditional. You know, my friend Mei Ling Wee, she did a study, I think probably about 20 years ago, where she did the study in University of Indonesia, and she found that the students there at the time, maybe Miranda can appreciate this, the girls at the time, they would actually underperform academically because they didn't want to be seen as to be too smart. But 20 years later, things are very different. They don't underperform, believe me. They actually fight to be the best. And this is the kind of system and the ecosystem that we have to encourage. The way, why I get 30% when I was in the Ministry of Trade and why here, is because it's merit-based. And you need, whatever it is, you need some kind of objective assessment, whether it's the aptitude test or whether it's you know, some objective merit-based system that allows you to pick. And when you do that, you will find that it is 30% or 40% or whatever. A good example is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which started they were one of the champions in bureaucratic reform way back in the 2000s, when they hired new recruits for the ministry. You apply with a number. Just a number. You don't know whether it's a male or a female. And then they do all kinds of tests. And just by using that system, they found that they had more than 50% were women that were selected based on merit. And that's the reason why you see now a lot of the young diplomats are women. Yeah? So that's the kind of ecosystem you have. And then you have the legal issue. You know, how can you make sure the rights and the ownership and so on are also in favor of women? So those are some of the ideas. And I would encourage all of you to think about these obstacles, the mindset change that must happen, and put it in Indonesia's context. I think Joanna will share with you the kind of more global context and her own experience and the McKinsey what is it called, in leadership, women leadership, 7-step or something like that. And let's see how can we implement that in Indonesia. I think Joanna is going to hopefully sharing the ideas that came out of, I think it was 5 years of research that she did, starting with herself, I think, but then reaching out to doing many interviews with many women. And you got to start with yourself. Basically, you have to start with yourself. That you want to be the one that wants to change. You have the passion and the ambition to want to succeed. So you start with yourself, and then you frame the way you want to go.